Today I shall have to do with meddlers, with the ungrateful, with the insolent, with the crafty, with the envious and the selfish. Most people assume these words were written by someone exhausted by the 21st century. It sounds like a reaction to a paralyzing inbox, the endless ping of smartphone notifications, and the exhaustion of trying to navigate a digital culture built on outrage and career competition. But that entry was written nearly 2,000 years ago by Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome. At the time, he was the most powerful person on the planet. He wasn't writing from a quiet palace. He wrote those words in a private journal while commanding troops on the freezing, blood-soaked front lines of the Marcomannic Wars, surrounded by plague, political betrayal, and the daily slaughter of combat. To maintain his sanity, he used a specific psychological framework. In this model, the moving outer ring represents everything he couldn't control: the weather, the enemy's tactics, or the opinions of his critics. But that solid inner core is the internal citadel. It represents the only thing he actually had authority over: his own mind. He realized that clarity doesn't come from fixing the environment around you. It comes from mastering how you choose to process that environment. The foundation of this citadel is a realization that external events, like a lost job or a harsh comment, cannot actually touch your character. Aurelius summarized the mechanics of this in his journal. Suppress the thought, "I am hurt," and you suppress the injury. This maps out how we process the world. On the left is the stimulus, a neutral fact, like a project being delayed. On the right is your emotional response, like a spike of anxiety. But in the middle is a distinct gap. That is your judgment. The anxiety only forms when you add the opinion that the delay is a catastrophe. The goal is to intercept the thought before it crosses that gap. By refusing to add a negative opinion to a fact, you sever the connection. You isolate the neutral data and stop the emotional response from ever being triggered. When you strip away your subjective opinions, what looks like a crisis is reduced to a set of manageable, objective facts. Still, the pressure to be successful and recognized can feel suffocating. We often act as though our social status is a matter of life and death. To break that perspective, Aurelius practiced the cosmic zoom. He would consciously shift his perception away from his own life and towards the scale of the universe. He looked back at history's greatest conquerors, men like Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar, and noted that despite their massive achievements, they all died and returned to the same earth as the people who followed them. He observed that entire civilizations, once convinced of their own permanence, are eventually reduced to these shattered walls and forgotten ruins. When you zoom out this far, the urgency to be remembered loses its grip. If all fame is just a temporary echo, the weight of others' expectations vanishes, leaving us free to focus on the only time we actually possess, the present. If you'd like to listen to the full text of the meditations, you can find a link in the description to download the audiobook on Audible. But there's a risk here. If our lives are so small, why bother getting out of bed at all? Aurelius found the answer in nature. He watched as bees, spiders, and ants relentlessly performed their specific functions. They don't ask for recognition, they simply do the work required to hold their part of the universe together. He called this man's work. It is the commitment to perform the duties required of your station simply because you are part of a social whole, regardless of whether you feel inspired or appreciated. Working for praise is volatile because your drive depends on a signal you can't control. But when your motivation comes from simply aligning with your own nature, your effort becomes a constant. When we detach our self-worth from the outcome, we stop the internal dialogue that usually interrupts our work. By removing the ego, we stop wasting mental energy on how we are being perceived. This silence is what allows for total immersion in the task, turning a fragmented mind into a singular force. The final test of the citadel is dealing with other people, specifically those who are toxic, insulting, or deceptive. Aurelius had a straightforward rule for this. The best revenge is not to copy him that wronged you. He viewed malice as a form of ignorance. People act badly because they don't know any better. If you mirror their anger, you've allowed their ignorance to cross the walls and infect your own mind. The most effective retaliation isn't a clever argument. It is simply refusing to let their behavior change who you are. This renders their toxicity powerless over your internal state. The external world will never stop being chaotic. The emails will keep coming, the economy will fluctuate, and people will be difficult. But the objective isn't to stop the waves. It is to live as a promontory, a solid rock that stands fast while the waters rage around it. The storm continues, but the trained mind remains untouched. By refusing to let external events dictate your internal peace, you eventually still the waters around you. This was the purpose of the meditations. By reclaiming authority over our own judgments, we deny the external world the power to dictate our happiness. We don't change the world, we change the mind that perceives it.